Yeah, so the basis behind, well, our platform name is Empower MU. So the basis behind Empower MU is definitely giving the voice back to the students. A lot of times from our experience in MSA, it's been a lot of we speak for the students rather than with the students. And that's kind of a problem that we've noticed just because how can you speak for someone if you don't actively go out and communicate with them? So that's how when we picked up our platform, we were trying to figure out what do students actually need. So we went out, started talking with some students, gathered about 50 students, and we came together and figured out, compiled our platform and said this is what the student body needs right now in this very moment, and that's how we came up with Empower MU. Well, last election cycle, we just felt it was too soon. We definitely had confidence in one of the slates, so we were like, okay, they're going to do a great job. We believe in them. After everything happened last semester, we definitely thought there's no point in waiting. We need to take an active role and actually start pursuing things to make a change on this campus.
Especially with both of us being so involved in MSA, we've seen like a lot of people hurting through the experiences of last semester, and it just comes to that point where you're like, wow, like I need to step up and take charge and fill a position that we know we can do good at.
Yeah. It's definitely just about streamlining communication. The biggest thing that we've been having the conversation about is open forum at full Senate, like how would it be different from that? Open forum at full Senate is very intimidating because you're sitting in front of about 50 students in suits and you don't know any of them. So definitely the town hall aspect truly gives students the opportunity to like roar at us, roar at MSA, figure out what we can do better. And it kind of just opens up the discussion because I think a lot of students do want to voice their opinions on this campus. They just don't know the best outlet to do that. So we can provide and utilize some of the resources that Mizzou has to promote the town hall. Then I definitely think students will show up and voice their opinions.
Definitely. I also think incentivizing too to get people to come, like more college students show up if you offer free
Free
food.
food, yeah.
So maybe that's in the future.
Definitely just shining the spotlight on administration. They kind of rely on students to forget and they rely on turnover within people in MSA so that way they can get away with certain things. So definitely just one idea that Tori and I came up with is like just bringing an everyday student to the meetings that we might have with an administrator so that way they can actually see firsthand what's going on. Also just kind of also exposing some of the minutes that we might gather from the meetings with, let's say, Interim Chancellor Foley, and just having those conversations. So just being as transparent as possible and letting them know what's actually taking place in the meetings. That way students can help us hold administration accountable as well.
Especially with the student voice like being more powerful than ever now and just the atmosphere on campus. I mean, you guys know your students, it says a lot when students like come together to speak on something. So definitely promoting an atmosphere where students can come together and voice their voices in those administrative meetings and making that accessible for students to come to.
Definitely. During my time as Secretary of Auxiliaries, I had one-on-ones with Jacob Jones, who's General Manager for MUTV, and then also one-on-ones with Kyle Norris, who's the GM of KCOU. So I definitely have that relationship that I've been able to build, and a lot of times during our one-on-ones, they always say, we need to figure out a way that we can get them using MUTV and KCOUs to get news out to the students. I mean, they're the direct resource that MSA has dealing with student media. So definitely just going along with that transparency and streamlining communication and just keeping MUTV and KCU involved in the conversation and developments that we have is definitely crucial and definitely the steps we plan to make. So definitely just utilizing the role of Secretary of Auxiliaries to streamline communication to the GMs and the GMs going from there because they are the directors, so they have the expertise on how to get it done. Yeah, so definitely we have, well, I'm a part of AASB, which is Alumni Association Student Board. So I definitely have already a working relationship with MAA, which is Missouri Alumni Association. Definitely, they just really love when students get involved and actively participate. So that process is pretty structured already. It's just the database of communicating between alumni and students is kind of the transition transitional issue, so they're just looking for students who actively want to participate. So if we can come up with a list of students who actively want to talk to alumni and have those relationships and build those partnerships, then they're ready to go. I've already talked to them in the past couple weeks about it, so it's definitely something that can be done.
The budget will be going through Senate, so if we want to make a change in the budget where we see fit, then we can advocate for that on Senate's behalf, because Senate will have the power to amend those changes. Moving forward, the way the budget process is set up now, whoever is elected as vice president will have the power to do the next budget. So just kind of like learning from those experiences is going to be a big thing. Also just using like the MSA operating fund and like talking to senators. I mean, if we need money for something, then pulling from your resources, because we know how MSA works. So just like using those outlets and that knowledge to help get our goals accomplished.
Yeah.
It's a great question.
Yeah, that is the question of the century. So definitely one thing we've noticed, there's supposed to be an MSA outreach committee, and the sole purpose of this outreach committee is to get students involved in MSA. Since for like the last 3 or 4 years, it hasn't been structured well enough to actually get that goal accomplished. Peyton and Brenda definitely tried to revitalize it by having the pride, but you're really reliant on individuals to stay in those spots and really go out and reach and meet new people. So definitely we're just looking to restructuring the Department of Student Communications within MSA so that we can have a well-structured machine to go actively and speak with students. So definitely expanding the MSA Outreach Committee and funding them to do that, and then definitely going forward with that so that we can have more people involved with MSA.
For sure, and I think on retention rate wise, keeping people involved, it's like having that positive image in MSA and feeling like that everybody in the room, their voice can be heard, because people don't want to be there if they don't feel important. So making sure that every student's voice who is in MSA feels valued will be a big part of that too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That goes back to our building our relationship with the organizations within joint session. So RHA would be that biggest point. Definitely just partnering with them more, because they do have like that direct line to the residents within the res halls. And then also working with student staff in the buildings. I definitely have a good relationship. I was in LA, so me and the LAs have a good working relationship. So just utilizing them as well to actively seek out residents and communicate with them and let them know what's going on within MSA. Definitely we want to expand on our relationship and our partnership with RHA, because they do reflect a very big group of students on this.
Student organization on campus.
So definitely just looking into that and building that relationship, I definitely think will help get across the message of students outside of FIGS. Yeah.
I think okay, well, I'm the It's MS campaign coordinator, so that's the national campaign that campuses across the country have been using to help sexual assault prevention. A way that I've been working on that recently is partnering up with the Green Dot in the athletics department, which is also listed on our platform, talking about doing certain events for them. So when we put PHA and IFC on our platform, we're hoping using their positions of risk management, because we know what happened over the summer when the chancellor had that summit to talk about sexual assault issues on campus. So just pulling those people into the conversation just to reach into different groups of campus was kind of the idea behind that. And then if you're not Greek, typically you know someone who is Greek, so just bringing in the largest amount of the population to get them to start talking about the issue is one of like our first step, and that's what that issue on the platform is all about.
Yeah.
It's bringing more people into the conversation. Well, Creed Week started, we actually learned about it from the SEC Exchange. It's a very, like, I guess, SEC trendy thing to do now. It has been done at Mizzou in the past. I believe it was under a different name, though. Yeah. But basically what it outlines is our 4 pillars, and then the last day is an inclusivity day. So you do, like, different events oriented on, you know, respect, all of those things. You have, like, speakers come in, fun activities, crafts, and the school together creates like a creed, and then students sign on saying like, I abide to agree to the creed of the University of Missouri, which promotes inclusivity, respect for all students, that kind of thing, the growing of knowledge. So that's what we hope to accomplish by Creed Week, is to bring like more of the Mizzou community together, saying that we're all going to abide by this, we all respect this, and hopefully get diverse groups coming to those events is the idea behind Creed Week.
Definitely. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've talked to Kathy a little bit about it and campus activities, hoping to pull from different areas of campus, like having those speakers come in. We could, of course, use DSA Speakers Committee, talk about that and making that like a DSA event because, as you know, DSA is under MSA. So working with whoever the Department of Student Activities Director will be at that time will be a large portion of hopefully where that funding comes from, and then reaching out to like the Multicultural Center, places like that to help get some funding.
How it's supposed to be structured is the president of each joint session government is supposed to meet once a month. And what that's supposed to do is increase communication, increase collaboration, all those different aspects. The challenge with that is you have a lot of involved students trying to find 1
Busy
hour
schedules.
to meet. And even though it's like once a month, it's still very hard. So definitely not necessarily increasing the number of joint sessions we have, but at least having one representative from each org sitting around together discussing the issues that our campus is facing, and then come up with some solutions that each org can take part in. So definitely just increasing that communication and having it well structured so that way we can show the student body that we're making an effort to communicate and solve the issues that are happening on campus.
I think when you bring a diverse group of people, obviously those students representing, president of PHA, IFC, Forefront, they all see different things happening on campus just because of the like inner Mizzou community, I guess you're involved in, the people you have in contact with. And so as student body president and vice president of the undergraduates, you need to know what's happening with every undergraduate student. So making sure that we bring those students into the communication and bring them into the table to be talking about what's happening in their area of campus will help the students, because then maybe there's something MSA can do for them and help that organization progress with whatever their student government is doing.
It wouldn't, because those meetings would just be the president, so that's non-legislative. And when we go to joint session, the representative is whoever the Senate Speaker is. So the legislation still follows suit. I think, if anything, more legislation will come out of that meeting just because we're meeting more often and having those discussions and being more aware of the issues that are happening on campus so we can develop solutions to them. I think that would definitely show the strength of joint session and kind of rebuild it back up. A lot of the joint session meetings are ended early. There's always like something that happens. So it's just creating that bridge of communication and definitely getting back to the sole purpose of serving the students for all of us. Definitely, I think it starts with educating the leaders themselves. It's a very hard topic, dealing with like race relations and all those different aspects, because they're hard conversations to have. So when we mobilize certain communities and like have those conversations and talk to their leaders, usually that information gets disseminated out. So definitely that's the first step we've thought about, and that starts with educating ourselves. Definitely having the MSA Leadership Summit, which is also on the platform, and just having those brief discussions and in-depth discussions about how can we improve and getting educated on different topics on campus. I know a lot of things have come up about CS 1950 and just education of what's going on with them. So definitely just bringing actual members of CS 1950 and bridging that gap of communication, educating other students about what's actually going on, rather than relying on media perception that CNN or whomever is covering, and just really getting down to the facts of the situation. I think a lot of students want to get educated, they just don't have the right outlet and the right means to get that education. So. I think it definitely starts, well, I know Vice Chancellor Henson is working on that now with the diversity course requirement. So just honestly analyzing that structure of how it's going to look, and then providing feedback. I think the best step that MSA can take is definitely making sure there's a feedback structure after it. I know that was a big concern with the 90 More training that they implemented this past year, that there wasn't enough feedback to be given and then not enough progress to see after the feedback. So definitely just working with administration to figure out best ways on implementing the program, but then also providing feedback on how it can be improved, rather than just sticking with the same model for years to come. So. One thing that I thought was a great idea when I spoke with them was the requirement for all auxiliary directors and their executive boards to go through DPE, Safe Space, and Green Dot training. I think it's crucial just because we have to take those first steps to educate ourselves. I know that Senate already does it at their retreat exec. We do it as well. Well, when I was on exec, we did it as well. So it's just definitely making sure that we're covering all the bases within MSA, and then maybe the director's like, oh my gosh, I love this facilitation. I'll bring this in for the entire membership of my auxiliary or whatever. So that's definitely one thing that we did pull from their campaign that we thought was pretty good idea.
Definitely. I've actually, the reason we have that contact is because I'm dating a basketball player who is on the Student Athletic Advisory Committee. So fun how that works out. I've been in meetings with Kim Bishop, who is one of their advisors, and a couple of their GAs, just talking about like how MSA has never really reached out to the athletics community, and that's such a large population. And as we've seen in recent events on campus, when the football players took a stance, how their voice was, I guess, bashed in the media. People said, oh, you're athletes, you shouldn't have a say on campus. And we as MSA feel that we want their voices in the room because they are students. They're paying student fees just like the rest of us are. So making sure we include their voice and we're representing them, because I believe we only have one athlete currently involved in MSA Senate. Taylor, she is a track girl and she runs, she's like
Pole vaulter.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So just making sure that we represent them, and I guess that's our contact in there. We've talked a lot about working with like Green Dot and sexual assault, and It's on Us, and that's how like we want to start that relationship and then see how it goes and where we can build upon it from there.
Well, I know that the president and vice president meet with the campus dining services director every month to give feedback about how things are operating, which is kind of hard because they don't really go to dining halls because they're usually like a junior or senior, so they don't really have swipes. I always thought it was interesting. So definitely how we've been trying to work on the relationship with RHA and ELO is Bike Share. Bike Share is co-sponsored by RHA, ELO, and MSA, and it kind of just restructuring on how that's going to look, because I've personally have rented a bike from Bike Share, and they're terrible. And so it's like they're like in really bad shape because they're outside and they're subject to the environment and all those different aspects. So definitely just expanding that relationship with them. That way we can have like, I feel like a lot of relationships are built after you put in work together on projects. So definitely I know that RHA is already trying to expand Bike Share. So helping them with that change and helping ELO with that change as well, definitely just starting that relationship in that project base. Yeah.
Definitely. A lot of the things on our platform are things that we've already been working on. Sean is, as you mentioned, Secretary of Auxiliaries. I was the Academic Affairs Chairwoman and also formally and still am the campaign coordinator for It's On Us. So that's why you see like a lot of those ideas are very well structured within our platform, and that's why we did like the little bullet points of how we're going to do this, because those are things that we're very passionate about and we already have been working on.
Yeah, definitely dealing with the MSA Leadership Summit, which is an idea I came up with last semester. And ultimately the issue was, do we do it now because there's somebody that's going to be elected soon? Like, it was just a whole bunch of stuff dealing with timeline. Overall, they thought it was a great idea, just necessarily the placement of time. So it's definitely something we've had experience. I planned the MSA family reunion last semester with Tori. So it was just one of those things where I kind of knew the structure on how it needed to be planned. I just needed the go ahead from like the Senate Speaker, President, and Vice President to do it, but they were like, oh, let's calm down because they're not ready yet. But then dealing with the diversity and inclusivity training for all auxiliaries, that was something that Chris and Hayden kind of gave me the idea, and I just started it right away. So there's definitely something I didn't want to just cut off because I'd already told the directors about it and say, oh, just kidding, now that they're gone, we're just going to forget about this program. I think it's definitely something you have to keep consistency, like once you start something, finish it. So, yeah.
Another good question.
Yeah, right. You want to start?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a thing that you just asked us about is our experience in MSA. So I believe that sets us apart from the other candidates, just knowing we have a to be frank, we have a better knowledge of what's happening on MSA, and being involved in MSA, we know where the problems are. And when you want to come into an organization and fix it or bring it closer together, you need to know where those problems are at. If you don't know how an organization works or how it functions, how can you be expected to make that change? So that's a way that we're different. We also are involved in many different areas of campus. I know, like, me coming from a sorority, having MSA background too, that's helped me to see two very different sides of things. With MSA, there was a lot of social justice conversations happen, and I got to hear some opposing sides just because of the community that I'm involved in. So we have both views coming into it, and you can speak to your involvement outside of what we bring to the table.
Yeah, I think one thing I've noticed out of this election than the past one is there's a sense of respect between all three slates. Like, we generally, like, after the debates, we all shake each other's hands, and it's like you don't feel like, yeah, right, and hug. There's not really animosity towards anybody. It's just who has the best ideas and who can do the best job for MSA right now. I think what Tori and I bring to the table is our knowledge and our experience within MSA. I think it's very crucial that that's here right now, because right now MSA is at rock bottom, essentially, and we need to rebuild that trust and rebuild that transparency. So it's one thing that you'll hear a lot of the other slates say is that we know where the problems are. It's one thing to know where the problems are, it's another thing to know how to fix them. Tori and I have had experience with, like, bylaw reform in the past. I did more bylaw reform my freshman year than I think I went to class. So it's like all those different aspects that I really had to think about, and Tori had to think about when we decided to run. It's like, yes, we still have a lot of projects on our plate right now, but can we take those projects to a higher platform and really make sure that they get accomplished? I think we do have the benefit of the relationships and resources that we've been able to acquire over the last couple of years within MSA, and just have that foundation. I think a lot of times when a slate comes in, they don't know where the first point of contact is. We definitely don't have that issue because we've already been building those relationships and building those points of communication. And I think our learning curve wouldn't be as strenuous as the other two slates.
Definitely. When you have a student leadership position, as I'm sure you guys know, working with, like, broadcasting and MUTV, it's about who you know and, like, how to get those connections, to get those contacts, to get those people in the room meeting with you. And being an MSA, we've seen the people before us and who they've met with, what has worked and what hasn't worked. And our own personal and relationships with administration will be a very key point if elected president and vice president.
Yeah. I think it's definitely a lack of communication and transparency to the student body is one thing. Another thing I guess you could talk about is just the structure of some of the departments that we have. Department of Student Communications is a prime example. It's supposed to be a department. So a department is more than one person. It's supposed to be like 20 to 30.
It's one person.
Yeah, it's been operating on one person for the last couple years, which is an issue because that ultimately breaks down in lack of communication, lack of transparency, outreach, because that's where the outreach leg is. And just reiterating some of those key points about we need to get back to the foundation of service. Serving the student body. I think another thing that we have noticed is a lot of personal and political ambition clouding the work that we're supposed to be doing. A lot of people are focused on, like, that next title rather than that next project. And so that's something we want to work with whoever the next Senate speaker is in an MSA and whoever is on executive cabinet to kind of get that ball rolling. And then also definitely including the justices into the conversation. A lot of times they're forgotten about in the judicial branch. It's like that extra leg. So definitely reeling them into the conversation and saying we really need to take a look at our Constitution, our bylaws, and really figure out the structure because there are some flaws with how we operate. And so just realizing that we aren't perfect and what steps are we going to take to remedy those imperfections is key.
And I think the reason why we say we see the flaws in it is because Sean was on executive cabinet, I was on legislative cabinet, and we were both getting, when the events happened last semester, we were both getting different information, and being that we are part of one organization, the communication should have been flowed to us the same way. We should have been getting the same information, and this person said yes, well, I was told this person said no. So we know where the gaps in communication were, and we will hopefully work to fix those.
Yeah.
Well, as you mentioned, partnering up with Green Dot and athletics, that's a huge part of the It's On Us campaign. It's On Us days will be happening after a DSS is Mental Health Week. So there will be 3 days consisting of that, like a pledge day. We're going to have a day where people come together and like sign a poster. It's on us for this semester. Next year is when we want to implement doing a green dot game with a couple of like Mizzou athletic departments. I've talked with Kim Bishop about hopefully getting some of the athletes who are on those teams green dot educated, just because when I was talking and having conversations with some the people from athletics, they were like, what's green dot? Like, we've never heard of that before. And so involving them in that conversation is another place to go, because, you know, it's on us as the awareness of it, but green dot is how to prevent sexual assault from happening. It's that bystander intervention and making proactive green dots using that, and that's kind of somewhere we hope to take It's on Us. Mm-hmm.
So partnering with other organizations, by that it could be like a wide range of things. So it just kind of depends on which org you're speaking of. Definitely how we've been thinking about it is definitely co-programming opportunities. A lot of times how you build those relationships is like actively working and you have a product at the end of the day and say, hey, we did that together. And it kind of reiterates that point of like, we work well together, we can do this, and all those different aspects. One thing I've thought about in the past is definitely working with AASB and combining that with DSA as well to kind of push the envelope on different events, really get some traction, really have more students involved, because I mean that's ultimately the goal, to serve as many students as possible. So just definitely including different orgs, and that way we can reach a diverse background of students and incorporate different aspects, and plus more funding helps. MSA is not like endless supply of money, so definitely co-programming offers the opportunity for us both to chip in and really have a great product at the end of the day. It's very hard to do unless you have like the way. How it generally works is it's at the discretion of like the department director on how the money is spent. So they have a certain allotment and their committees have a certain amount allocated to them as well. Then you have like the general MSA and vice president who have like an operating budget. Yeah. But in like our positions, we didn't have like a fund, you know.
I think
so.
Yeah, with co-programming, going back to like It's on Us, that was originally through DSS, and so that's an MSA thing that's happening, connected with DSS, involving athletics, and then also involving Green Dot. So that's like kind of one way how we've been like, I guess, testing the waters, yeah, like trial to see how that works.
Definitely. Another point to that was also our relationship with some of Mizzou's departments, like campus activities. Kathy Murray is also an advisor for MSA, so we kind of have that relationship with student life as well, with co-programming opportunities, like with the MSA Family Reunion last year. She definitely chipped in a lot with that. So it's just definitely starting that relationship to show that student orgs can partner with MU administration orgs, and we can have a great product and serve a lot of students at the end of the day. Definitely one thing that we've tried, I talked to Jacob Jones about this last semester, and it was just promoting kind of that transparency and communication, whether it's the president or vice president coming in to speak at the Good Morning Show and just having those conversations, letting students know, give an update. So just utilizing the resource that is MUTV to kind of get that message out there of what MSA is doing, since MUTV is housed within MSA, and just kind of building that relationship so that way you guys will be like that first know of like what's going on within MSA, rather than like the man-eater coming in and saying, oh, well, here's the news for you, MUTV, if you guys wanted to send it out as well. So definitely just trying to build that communication and realizing that MSA has its own student media platforms, and giving them kind of the information first and having that go out, and then kind of like following along with that trend.
And definitely, and I feel like if you outreach to students and let them know what you're doing, they'll be more likely to come back into you and give you feedback. So for the students who listen to KCOU and watch MUTV, making sure that they have the resources to make us easily accessible.
Yeah.
We both have
different political views.
Political parties, so anything can happen. We're both voting for different people for president.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, mine will make it to the primary though, but that's a different topic.
Mine might, but that's besides the point. I think working with you over the past over a year, I guess now, we've definitely butted heads a lot. But at the end of the day, it's because we both care, and we have like a good working relationship.
We do.
So I think that knowing each other's like differences in the way we view things differently when it comes to like, let's say, social issues. We were asked a question about concealed carry being on campus, and you saw how other sites responded to that question, and we were kind of like more in the middle of it just because of both where we stand. So bringing in different aspects of that conversation will definitely help us, because we do have different political ideologies when it comes to things like that. And I believe that can only help us, because we'll both be advocating for a different voice in the room when we're talking to each other, and that, like, showing students that yes, like, one of us is red, one of us is blue, but we can still talk about these issues, because ultimately we're working for the students. So I hope that promotes that more on campus, like people who come from different backgrounds to get in the conversation. To, you know, you're supposed to be helping everybody. It's not about like who believes in what. It's what's the best outcome for the students.
I think Tori and I have learned through like the past 2 years that we don't always agree, but we definitely offer a different perspective. So that when we get into those conversations, she might have one point, I might have another, and we talk each other through it on like how we're thinking that way. And it definitely just kind of starts that conversation of like, okay, we don't always think the same, but we can still come up to an amicable solution for the issue. Definitely, we won't always agree, so we also have a structure to where if we can't come up with a decision, there's other people that like provide input as well. So kind of how we've been thinking about it is working with the other joint session groups before we make a decision. A lot of times it's MSA is contacted first by administration, and then they make a decision, and then it just goes from there. That hasn't always been a perfect model to me, because you're only one person or two people and you only have a certain scope. So definitely including different voices into the conversation, and just kind of having that debate and kind of having that conversation, so that way we might have missed something that another group might have saw. So just definitely developing those conversations to where we can come up to a better solution than we would have initially started with. Yeah, I definitely, the last semester specifically, the biggest thing that we were having a decision issue with, was the placement of where MSA stood with Concern SUM 1950 or not. Ultimately, we ended up taking a stance with Concern SUM 1950 and addressing the issues with Tim Wolf and those different aspects. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that was like a 3 to 4 person decision rather than a collective body. Ultimately, I think we did make the right decision at the end of the day, but it's just incorporating those other perspectives, because as soon as MSA made that statement, a lot of other joint session orgs were kind of upset, because it was like you're reflecting upon the entire student body, but other students weren't involved in that conversation. So definitely just kind of incorporating those different aspects when we do have to make big decisions and make big stances on certain issues on campus is definitely a step to take. Like a prime example could possibly be Melissa Click. That might be something that might come up in this next semester or so. So just definitely involving more people into the conversation about that, and just trying to make a formalized decision on where MSA can stand with that. I mean, honestly, it can be as simple as creating a group meet between all joint session presidents and just saying, hey, here's an issue I was presented to by Hank Foley. What do you guys think about this? And just automatically starting that conversation. So that way you're at least making a conscious effort to start that communication. You're not going to always be able to call a meeting at the stroke of midnight and have everybody come together and have an inclined debate, but definitely at least trying to reach out and involve people into the conversation. And so that way they're aware if they do have a specific opinion about something. So that way you can also process that when you're making a formalized decision.
Biggest fear. My biggest fear would be letting students down, and of course, I don't know, letting also our campaign team down. We have a lot of people who have wonderfully supported us throughout all of this, like whether it's our social media, helping to put together a platform. I think not being a good enough leader for them would be my biggest fear, but I also have so much support from that community where I don't see that happening. But yeah, I guess that's my biggest fear.
Oh my goodness. That's a hard one. I guess getting impeached. No, I'm just kidding. I would definitely say the biggest fear is not living up or fulfilling the promises that we're making throughout this platform. I think a lot of times you never know what's going to come up when you're elected. Peyton has been telling me that for the last several months. Like, try and focus on the platform, but realize that there's things that are going to pop up that you just can't control, that you couldn't have predicted. So definitely just making sure that we're trying to get as much of our platform done as possible. And if we're realizing that, okay, that we're running out of time and there's so much happening on campus, no matter what the circumstance might be, involving more people into the conversation so that way we can still get the things that we said we were going to get done through our term. I think it's definitely a big fear of not getting the goals that we have accomplished throughout our term.
That is currently being worked on by DSS, which again comes a lapse in not knowing what MSA is or what it's doing. So DSS has been working on that with MUPD. They were involved in a think tank. They held a event with MUPD and sponsoring pizza. So definitely using those resources and connections that are already there is a way that we plan on improving that. But that's things that are already happening in MSA, where it's just we can provide our input to make sure those things have the growth to go with that.
Definitely last semester, executive cabinet met with the chief of police for MUPD, and he was kind of just describing to us the structure of how they're planning to make strides in like staffing and those different aspects, planning to hire 4 more officers just this year. They're going through a major online overhaul for their website, and then just also figuring out the best approach. I know a lot of times MU Alert has been of concern for a lot of students within the past several years, so he kind of just iterated some points about that when MU Alert is sent out, it's been checked and verified, and that's kind of the structure of how it is now, but that doesn't mean that's the structure it has to be. So definitely he's open to that conversation, and I look forward to working with DSS and other departments within MSA to get that done. Yeah, I definitely think about just Tori and I splitting up that time, because sometimes it's like kind of that divide and conquer mentality where there's only so many people that you can go out and actively meet with administration and rely on that information to come back and have a general discussion. So maybe destructuring is where I would meet with Chancellor Foley, Interim Chancellor Foley, and having those conversations with him, and then getting Tori involved in that conversation, whether she's meeting with Vice Chancellor Scroggs or Vice Chancellor Hinn. Exactly, all those different aspects. So just trying to rely on different parts within an MSA, like the senators, and just incorporating them into the conversation. That way we can kind of divide and conquer and then bring that information back and develop and make sure we're all on one accord, because a lot of times administration relies on just one person to meet, and then they leave that meeting and, okay, they're not going to come back. It'll be fine. There's no follow-up to this. So just making sure that there is a follow-up, because that's ultimately how we're also going to hold them accountable for their statements that they're making. And they'll slowly realize that MSA is communicating internally, so they should as well. And then kind of build that relationship with them as well, so we know that we can actually get things done for the student body. I think one question that hasn't been asked is, what will be the turnout for this election? I know that's been a concern, because last election, I think there was like, 5,000, 6,000 students that came out, but then the year before you had like 7,000 to 8,000 students that came out and voted, which is the highest we've had. I think this one will probably be a little bit lower, because a lot of students still don't even know that there's an election going on right now. And I think that's ultimately another flaw within like the Department of Student Communications, because their role is also to help promote the election. That's hard to do when you only have one person, again. So just kind of restructuring that so as many students as possible can get their voice out. I think if a lot of students say, I didn't even know about this election, and we kind of keep reiterating that same point, hopefully we'll kind of get on the same accord. The BEC will get involved with more Department of Student Communications, and we can start building that relationship so that we can kind of push that envelope of having the election be broader in its horizon and kind of incorporating more students, because we want as many students as possible to vote. We want as many opinions to vote as well. So just trying to include as many students as possible, I think, is a concern that I've noticed throughout this past election, which is kind of sad, because it might end up only being like 3,000 or 4,000 students speaking for 28. So definitely just trying to push the envelope on election turnout is a big thing that I think needs to improve as well.